I've heard stories of people seeing someone that they know being in one place and then later appearing in another. These are usually one-off occurrences that are remembered with fear, and rightfully so. It is unnatural to see such a thing and try to comprehend it. What if that strange impersonator was your mother? And what if you grew up with it? My brother and I were very young when we first started to see my mother's doppelganger. I think we experienced the phenomenon for so long because we weren't afraid of it, initially. For the longest time, we didn't even know we were seeing a double. It wasn't unusual to see our mother walking into a room only to follow her mere seconds later, and she be absent from said room. As a small child, you have no concept of time, so many of these odd occurrences were reasoned away as, I must have been playing longer than I expected and Mom already slipped away. My mother was also a bit of a trickster growing up. If the opportunity arose to pull a silly prank or even scare you from the shadows with a gotcha, she would. Many times, when following her double, she would disappear around a corner. This was reasoned as, Mom is hiding to try and scare us. So we would leave the room altogether, not going to let her have the satisfaction of the prank. Later, we would try to scare our actual mom in retaliation. She would, of course, be bewildered and protest that she had not been where we claimed we had seen her. Nor was she trying to spook us. I experienced her double on a different level than my brother. My bedroom was the last room at the end of the hallway. Outside my bedroom and to the left was a bathroom that had a nightlight on all the time. Many times I would see the black silhouette of my mother silently walking down the hall, stopping to stand in my doorway, watching me. I would often think it was because my mom had caught me staying up past my bedtime and she was going to stand there to make sure I went to sleep. I would lay there with my eyes half open until the shadow walked silently back down the hall. Moments later, I would hear the creaks and groans of the hallway floor as my real mother would come into view of the nightlight. This time, not engulfed in darkness. Again, as a child, I reasoned what I saw. However, I didn't understand how my mother could avoid the light of the nightlight the first time she came down the hallway, nor how the double could move so silently to and fro when my actual mom would make slow and awkward steps, trying not to make too much noise as she made her way to the bathroom. One of the last times I remember seeing the double at night, it walked to my bed, leaned down with an unnatural wide smile, and stared at me. I can't recall my reaction, only remembering a similar story that my aunt told me once. As a child, she awoke one night to my mom wearing a red bandana on her head and leaning into my aunt's face with a smile all too wide. My aunt screamed, raced out of the bedroom to find my mom sleeping, and slapped her for scaring her. Hearing this story growing up was hilarious and chilling at the same time. Now faced with the same encounter, I did not find it funny. Again, I don't recall my reaction. I only remember being torn between thoughts of, if it was my mom, then my mom was a terrible person for scaring her child like that. Yet, if it wasn't my mom, well, I didn't want to think about that. As we got older, our justifications for seeing her double could not stand. One time I recall seeing her walking down the hallway. Convinced that it was once and for all Mom pranking us, I followed behind her immediately. As we went down the hall through the kitchen, my pace increased to almost a jog, while my mother's gait, to the eye, never went beyond a walking pace. While this was bizarre, I still followed only steps behind. I watched her descend 2 steps into my parents' bedroom and turn to the right behind the bedroom door. I smiled. Behind the bedroom door was nowhere to go, so I knew I had caught her this time. I waited with anticipation for her to jump out at any moment, wanting to get the upper hand. I quietly crept to the door until I could jump out with a boo, swinging the door back. There was nothing. I had seen her walk behind that door. I hadn't let my gaze drift from the spot, so there was no way she could have slipped away. With a chill running up my spine, I left the room immediately to find my actual mother. When I found her, I explained what had happened. She was creeped out, but at the time, we didn't think of it being paranormal. That was reserved for ghost stories and unexplained sounds. We had never heard of seeing a double of someone. Now sufficiently creeped out, my brother and I were relieved to know that we were not crazy. One thing to keep in mind during all of this was that we never saw its face. It was always a profile view with the face masked by hair, or we would see it from behind. Many times, after learning that we were dealing with someone otherworldly or something otherworldly, if my brother and I saw our mother but couldn't see her face, we would call out, "Mom?" If she turned around, we were safe. If she responded, as if she didn't hear us, we would just shut our bedroom door and not come out until we heard another living person in the house. One time I forgot to do so. It was standing in the kitchen with a red shirt on. I proceeded down the hallway asking it a question as it walked into my parents' bedroom. Thinking she hadn't heard me, I followed it into the bedroom, its back towards me. I asked my question, again, and received no response. "Mom?" I asked. No response. Chills went up my arms as I realized that I was not with my mom. I ran outside and into the grass where my actual mother was standing in a green shirt watering the grass. "Have you had that shirt on this whole time?" I asked. The answer really didn't matter. I just didn't want it to be true that I had been standing alone in a room with that thing. My father, during all those years, was either dismissal of our accounts or suggesting my brother and I harbored some secret sin that was bringing this phenomenon onto ourselves. He was, and still is, a very strict and devout preacher. He would have to question his judgments toward us the day he experienced the double for himself. My mother and he had gotten into an argument that day. Not speaking to one another for several hours, my father decided to end the feud and approached her as she washed the dishes. He talked to my mother at length as she continued her duties around the kitchen with cold indifference to what he had to say. Angry, he stormed out of the room, only to run into my mother coming from the laundry room. "How did you get here so fast?" he asked, alarmed. My mother was thoroughly confused, as she had been doing the laundry and was walking back to the main part of the house. My dad was quite upset about the whole encounter as he retold it. My brother and I relished in the "told you so" moment. The last time I saw the double, I was 19 and going to community college in the next town over. I had returned home from a late class. Putting the hour around midnight, I settled on the love seat to watch some TV before going to bed. From where I sat, if I looked over my right shoulder, I could look into the kitchen to my parents' bedroom door. I sat watching TV when I heard the familiar click and turn of a knob. It was the same sound I had heard hundreds of times growing up. My mom trying to be as quiet as possible as she exited her bedroom. I looked over. I saw the glare of the TV and the reflection of my mom's glasses. I waved and turned my attention back to the TV. I heard the floor creaking as my mom approached. From the corner of my eye, I could see her standing just outside the light of the television, a few feet away. She just stood there. I turned back to her with a peculiar look. I didn't know why she would be lingering there and not come closer, or at the very least say something. Looking at her, I asked with a laugh, "What?" The form of my mother stood motionless, wordless. My body went cold as I realized I wasn't speaking to my mom. I turned my head slowly back to the TV, keeping that thing in my peripheral. I turned the volume up. With each click on the volume, the form moved closer to me until it was standing in the threshold of the doorway to the living room. We were within arm's reach of each other. The volume was now at an obnoxious level. I hoped someone would wake up and come and see why the TV was blaring. My eyes were watering as I didn't dare to blink. Why didn't the light from the TV pierce the darkness? It just stared at me. Was it getting closer? Click! My parents' bedroom door. I jumped up and back to face the direction of the sound and to put more distance between myself and that thing, where it should have been standing. It was gone. The glow of the TV filled the kitchen, hitting my mom's sleepy face as she squinted from the light. Fumbling for her glasses, she shushed me and waved her hand for me to turn the TV down. I did so gladly. She looked at me like I was out of my mind for being so loud in the dead of night. I quickly explained that I had seen her double again and wasn't about to be alone with it, or walk past it, hence the television volume. She understood. No more needed to be said. My mother had always believed us. At 19, I asked my mom to stand sentry and make sure I made it to my bedroom safely. Thankfully, that was the last time I saw my mother's doppelganger. I still haven't decided in my mind what it was, but all my summations aren't good. Thinking about the why and what of everything troubles me, so I don't. It's a fun tale to share when people want a thrill of an actual paranormal story. I don't go into great detail. A lot has been lost to time, but mostly I don't want to recall it. Today, when my family and I visit my parents, it's a warm and protected feeling of being home. But there are times when I get up in the middle of the night, I look into the darkness and wonder, will I see it again?